The rivalry is back on.
Welcome back to another edition of the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your host, as always, Cody Felger. Joining me, as always, Derek Larger. We hope you guys had a Merry Christmas. We hope you guys have a Happy New Year as well as 2019 closes out. Derek, how was your Christmas?
It was pretty good, Cody. I can't complain. Just got to spend time with family. Got a bunch of really cool gifts that I asked for. It's just another great Christmas all around. Can't complain, man. Just another great day to remember Jesus and to spend time with the things that matter most. And I can't complain, man.
Absolutely. And you got some Colts related things. And I saw you got a Christmas ornament, got some other things. What were some of your favorite presents from 2019 Christmas?
Well, I got two different Colts ornaments. One of them was the Colts blimp that I posted on Twitter. So if anyone didn't see it, please be sure to check that out. It's really cool. It's actually a collector's item. So it's really a really valuable thing. But I got that. I got a Indianapolis Colts polo, an official NFL gear Indianapolis Colts polo, which I'm definitely going to use for when I go to training camp next year. So I'm going to use that. A bunch of cool Colts stuff. I didn't get the Quentin Nelson's House of Pancakes shirt that I wanted. But other than that, that's the only thing I didn't get Colts related.
Yeah, well, that's good. It was weird for me. Like, I didn't get anything Colts related, I think, for the first time, like, Christmas in a long time, because I got all the stuff I really wanted. So, but the good news is I got a new mic, a new Rode mic, similar to yours, Derek. And this is the first time testing this thing out. So hopefully the sound quality is a little bit better. This is a really, really good mic from what you said, Derek. So I'm really hoping that the sound quality goes up for the podcast and that this is another way to improve and slightly improve. And that's kind of what we always do. And we were always looking for ways to improve. Hopefully we can get a camera again and we can get some maybe some what we tried out a couple months ago with just kind of doing face-to-face type things, like recording ourselves, actually like talking. I just don't have a great camera right now. So hopefully I can invest in one of those as I'm looking for a job. And so hopefully once I get that, kind of get settled a little bit, I can invest into one of those. But, but yeah, so with this, Derek, as we're recording this on December 30th. So only a couple days away now from the new year. And I thought that we could do this thing. My friend Zach Hicks, he's over there at stampedblue.com. He's been on the podcast. He's a friend of the show. He listed these categories out. I believe it was about 3 days ago now. He listed out all these categories for the Colts in 2019, 7 categories actually. The first one, team MVP, team offensive player of the year, team defensive player of the year, team rookie of the year, breakout player, most or biggest disappointment, and most underrated player. So of these 7 categories, that's kind of what I want to have our podcast based on off of our predictions. I know a lot of people gave their different takes. I gave my take. I don't know if you gave your take, Derek. We kind of wanted to walk through our take of these 7 categories for the Colts moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot of work ahead. The Colts finished 7-9, not ideal. They have a lot of work ahead of them on both sides of the ball. But we wanted to look back before we look ahead to the next season and kind of look at, despite the disappointing season, a lot of craziness this season, there were a lot of good things that came out of this season. So a lot of good players that, some broke out, some we already knew were good and continued to play good. But I thought that this would be a good thing. And I think there's, our opinions have changed for sure since we talked about this stuff. I think we had a podcast earlier in the summer where we kind of talked sort of like this stuff before. And so this is kind of an updated version of that, if you will. So we'll start with team MVP. Derek, for my team MVP, I had Quentin Nelson, and I don't think you can go wrong with Quentin Nelson. I mean, he's another Pro Bowl, his second consecutive Pro Bowl selection, potentially All-Pro. Didn't miss a game this season. I know he was potentially questionable for that Jacksonville game, but he beat the concussion. He was able to be out there, and he played all 16 games. Again, he's never missed a game in his career in his 2 years with the Colts now. So he's my team MVP because he's just such a good player. And I think that guard, a lot of people don't think about it, how much of an impact one player has on an offensive line. But I think ever since Quentin Nelson was drafted number 6 overall in 2018, he's just shown time and time again that he was worth that draft capital. He was worth taking him so high. And so for me, that's, there could be a couple different players, but for me, he is my team MVP.
Yeah, I am going to completely agree with you there. It was a tough one between Quentin and Darius, but like you mentioned with the not missing a game this season, Quentin Nelson, even though there were a few times where he had to get taken out because of a few injuries, he still either made his way back into the game or started and then played the next game. There was that injury he sustained, I think it was a couple weeks ago, where he kept having to come out of, I think it was it was either the other Jacksonville game or it was something else. I can't remember which game it was. But then, like you said, he beat the concussion this last week and was able to play there. And look, if you people really want to understand why a guard is the MVP of this team, just go watch the tape. Please go watch the tape. It never lies. And don't just watch from the start of the play to the end of when the ball goes down. Watch Quentin Nelson after the play happens. Watch what he does when he picks up his teammates, when he's always the first one to come pick up his teammate and pick him up off the ground. See where the tenacity and the angriness of this offensive line was before he got there to where it is now. He has completely changed the culture of that offensive line, and it is changing how the offense works. That's exactly why he deserves to be the MVP, because he is changing the way that this team plays on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about a complete culture change. Like, if you wonder what the Colts offensive line was like before Quentin Nelson got there, it was pretty much a disaster. I mean, these guys are getting pushed around, letting their quarterback get hit, take hits all the time. Really didn't take pride. Derek, when I remember listening years ago, I think it was Jeff Saturday or one of those guys from the Peyton Manning era. I mean, they said they took pride on keeping their quarterback clean. They took pride on not having their quarterback be hit. And I think that's the kind of mentality that Quentin Nelson brings to this offensive line. And truth is really just to this team. Like, I mean, you see him, like, even on those plays, like, player gets out of bounds. Who's the first player running up there helping his teammate up? It's Quentin Nelson. He's just that type of guy, that locker room guy. And I think, with offensive linemen, as a former offensive lineman myself, you don't get a lot of credit. But when you do, I mean, that is amazing. Like, he deserves to get the credit that he is getting. I mean, he is just that type of player. And he could probably play anywhere, but he's, an all-pro every year at guard, and he should be an all-pro for, a decade more, if not more. And so for me, he's the team offensive MVP for me. I guess not offensive, just overall team MVP for me. Quentin Nelson definitely takes the cake, and he's durable as well, which you talked about, Derek, already. The best ability is availability, and Quentin Nelson has been available, and he has been good for the Colts, and he's only getting better, which is crazy. I don't know if you heard him in the press conference, his kind of like end of the season press conference. He was talking about all these different things about how to improve, and we've talked about this time and time again on this podcast. Like, that's the kind of player you want, a player who is an all-pro type player, probably the best player arguably at his position, and he's still finding things that he wants to improve on. And that's, that's contagious for a team,
and not to mention when in topping off of that, somebody asked him how he felt about, the having to, learn from this and being an potential all-pro again and going to the Pro Bowl. They were asking him about that. He kept repeating himself, saying that I'm just excited to, perfect my craft even more on the off season. I'm ready to work hard, learn some new things, get even better. That is, we praise Darius Leonard so much for saying it. Let's give credit where credit's due to Quentin Nelson, who continues to improve. Everyone kept saying, how can Quentin Nelson get any better from what he was in year one? I mean, he certainly, I don't know how much better he's gotten, but he certainly did not get any worse. He was potentially the same, if not a little bit better and more effective in the way he blocked, especially in his run blocking, because we always knew he was good there. But yeah, I mean, Quentin Nelson, this dude has completely changed how this offensive line does things and how this team is now looking at things, and the attitude that these players are now playing with, that's coming off of Quentin Nelson right now.
Yeah. And moving on to the offensive player of the year for us, I couldn't go with, I could have gone with Quentin Nelson, but I wanted to go with another guy who had a breakout year, and that's Marlon Mack. I mean, this is a guy that we knew how good he was at the beginning of the year. The question was he going to be available for how many games was he going to be available? Is he going to be available for 13 games, 14 games? He did miss a couple games there with that injury, but with a hand injury. But overall, I thought that he, when he was in there, he was effective. And I mean, he had over 1,000 yards, the first Colts running back to do it since Frank Gore in 2016. And he also added 8 touchdowns. I mean, some of his numbers were slightly down a little bit. That being his touchdowns. I mean, last year he had 9 touchdowns. And also his yards per carry, he was 4.4 this year as opposed to 4.7 last year. But, it's kind of to be expected, I think, a little bit, Derek, especially with teams really honing in on that run game. I mean, because the Colts they finished probably top 5, maybe top 5. I know they were top 5 going into that Jacksonville game. And I think they ran for over 100 yards again, so they're probably in the top 5 still. But nonetheless, the Colts finished top 5, top 10 in the NFL. And teams knew the Colts can't throw the ball. I mean, they weren't throwing the ball well pretty much all year. And so they had to hone in. So it's kind of to be expected. The yards per carry would go down a little bit, but Marlon Mack was still very productive when he was with the Colts and when he was in there. And so, Marlon Mack gets my Offensive Player of the Year award. Who gets yours, Derek?
I was half tempted to give this to Zach Pascal, but Pascal didn't really get a lot of time early to show what he could do. I think this one's pretty apparent that Marlon Mack being the first time him getting 1,000-yard rushing season is exactly what he set out to do. And he was very effective in what he did this year. He basically got us he kept us in a lot of big games. We obviously go back to the first 2 games of the season where he was currently on pace to rush for 1,800 yards if he had kept that pace up. And then obviously we remember when we went into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs off of Marlon Mack's 130-yard game. I mean, the kid has been phenomenal. He was a workhorse this year, put in so many bad situations because the offense was not prolific. And, that ultimately fell on the shoulders of Marlon Mack. And as much as I hate to say it, obviously it got worse as the season went along because teams just realized that we were just going to try to run the ball. And, Marlon Mack never complained, just went out there, did his job, got his 1,000-yard season like he said he was going to, and like we thought could happen. And he just continued to show he's going to be a reliable back for us. And he's been relatively healthy given the circumstances. So hopefully we get a little bit more of a prolific offensive pass threat, then Marlon Mack's numbers could potentially continue to go up if knowing that defenses are going to have to contribute to pass coverage rather than just stopping the run.
Right, for sure. And that's huge. Like even, you look back at so many teams, like it's kind of amazing to me, Derek, that the Colts couldn't run the ball like back when Andrew Luck was their quarterback. Cause I mean, like he is a threat all the time. And the fact that the Colts couldn't get a running back, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, so Marlon Mack gets mine. He's definitely, I think he definitely showed something again, continued to show that he's the lead back. It's kind of wild to me, Derek. This is kind of off topic. It's kind of wild to me that do you remember people who were clamoring for Le'Veon Bell this last offseason? Mm-hmm. And Marlon Mack just silenced all the critics. And I mean, the Colts really, you look at it now, I mean, they have 4 legitimate running backs that they could roll with. And that's one of the few positions I think that the Colts probably don't need to address. And so Marlon Mack gets mine, but really the Colts running backs would probably get my MVP overall if we were looking at a position group in particular, which we're not going to. So that's a little bit of a bonus for you guys. But so moving on to Team Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, I think this one's pretty obvious. Darius Leonard gets it for me. And Leonard, again, he missed a couple games, but he still posted pretty good numbers for him. I mean, 121 tackles, 5 sacks, which is down a couple from last year, but he also had 5 interceptions, which I think could potentially show a little bit of his coverage skills. I mean, I know that was kind of the question for him. But he's just a ball hawk too as a linebacker, and he had 5 interceptions this year in 2019. He actually made the Pro Bowl this year. He didn't get snubbed, which is awesome. And, who knows, maybe an all-pro for Darius Leonard as well. But, he's just the heart and soul of that defense. I know that defense had some games where they looked really, really dominant, and then they had games where they looked really, really bad. But, through it all, Darius Leonard has been very good. He's been very good ever since the Colts drafted him in the second round in 2018. He's continuously shown that he was definitely the steal of that draft. And he continues to grow and continues to play well. Derek, I'm assuming you're probably going to say the same, but do you have anybody that maybe could shake it up a little bit, or are you going to stick with Darius Leonard?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say Darius Leonard here. It's quite easy for a lot of us to say who offensive and defensive players of the year are when we take into account, stats and the impact that they have on this season. Given what the season came out to, it's quite obvious who those people are. It's going to be quite interesting, though, who we're going to pick for these next four, because these next four, you could really add a few more names to this. But you're right, Darius Leonard, even with missing those 3 games, in these 2 seasons, and what is it now, 26 games for him? Or 28 games. He has 29 games. It's 29 games. He has 280 tackles, over 280 tackles. That is phenomenal. Almost 10 tackles a game. It's phenomenal what he does in just being everywhere on the field. He had 5 interceptions this year. There are only 2 guys in the NFL this season that have more interceptions than Darius Leonard. And trust me, none of them are linebackers. They're not linebackers. So, the impact that Darius Leonard has on this defense when he's out there is just phenomenal. He just makes the big play. This Colts defense in general seemed to me like they were making a lot more turnovers this season. I don't know if that kind of stood out to you a little bit more this season, but when you kind of look at this defense, they were a little more opportunistic and they made a couple more turnovers than what I'm used to seeing. But Darius Leonard, again, was just phenomenal again this year with the interceptions and obviously forcing some fumbles and pretty much averaging 9 tackles a game. Darius Leonard is just a beast. And again, to think he's in his 2nd season with the Colts and he's only going to get better with this young and really good linebacker core that he has. I am really happy to say that Darius Leonard is going to be with us for quite a while.
Yeah, and he did that. He had 121 tackles, 5 sacks, 5 interceptions, and he missed 3 games. And so what you can only imagine what would have happened if Darius Leonard played 16 games. Still phenomenal. Even if he played 16 games, that's a phenomenal stat. In 13 games, what Darius Leonard did. And so if he can play 16 games, man, he could be breaking some records. So that's very, very exciting. The next category, I should say, on my list, team rookie of the year. I think we might differ on this one, Derek. My team rookie of the year was probably Khari Willis.
Okay.
And Khari Willis, man, he kind of came out, talking about coming out of nowhere. Drafted in the 4th round. I think when he was initially drafted, I thought, okay, he's probably not going to see the field much this year. Maybe he'll work in some special teams, get a few reps, and continue. Maybe next year in 2020 he'll supplant Clayton Mathers for that strong safety position. But Khari Willis came and he saw that opportunity and he took it, and he started 9 games for the Colts, played in 14 games. He had 71 tackles. He was very, very good as a rookie for the Colts, a very good value pick in that 4th round. He played in 14 games. So he missed that last final Jacksonville game. But overall, I think he, for me, was probably the steal. If I had a category for the Colts steal of the draft, he would be there. And he's probably, honestly, the rookie that I would say was the rookie of the year for the Colts in 2019.
Yeah, you and I differ a little bit here. Zach did some results here, and he said that the guy who he picked, or the fans that voted on his thing picked, that was slightly ahead of Khari Willis, who I'm going to pick, is Bobby Okereke. Look,
yeah.
I know that when we're looking at impact of what they were all doing this year, I think Khari made a little bit bigger impact in the secondary, given the unfortunate circumstance that they had to deal with. But when you're in that linebacker core with Darius Leonard and Anthony Walker, that is a lot of pressure to live up to the expectation of having to be right with them, do what they need you to do and make plays, right? I saw as this season progressed, Bobby Okereke was making a lot more plays and being in the right position a lot more of the time. And I think he was very, very good, not only in pass coverage, but in making plays on the run as well. He just looked like he fit with the Darius Leonard, Anthony Walker status of being quick and being in the right spot when it mattered. I think Bobby Okereke, being as a rookie, being in the third round, and everyone was asking about his status of what was going on at Stanford before this. Everyone was like, oh, should we draft this guy? Can you rely on him? And he's a Stanford product. We're going to see how he fits. I mean, Bobby Okereke's been nothing but great. I mean, he's made plays. He's never really seemed to be out of place, to be completely honest with you. I would love to see Bobby Okereke continue to get these snaps. I mean, Pat McAfee said this guy's going to be the future Hall of Famer for us. So far, Bobby Okereke looks like he's in a good position to do that. So I liked what I saw from Okereke this year to be in my opinion, the most difficult spot on that defense this year, having to be right next to Darius Leonard, who was the best linebacker in football that last year, and having to fill that role. I think he did a phenomenal job, and I can't wait to see him get more snaps.
Yeah, he was a guy, man, that I actually was fortunate enough to interview, be a part of his interview when I went down to Colts training camp this last year. And one thing that I noticed about Okereke that I think is really valuable for the Colts is he's a very versatile linebacker. Like they were asking him, like, Bobby, where are you going to play at? Are you going to play at the Sam? Are you going to play at the Mike? Where are you going to play? And he said, I'll play anywhere. I can play anywhere and play it well. And he's shown this year he can do that. I think, I believe he started 8 games this year. So he put in some good time, got some good reps, and he's a good player, it looks like. And so the Colts are pretty set at linebacker as well. I mean, when you look at it, they got Darius Leonard, Pro Bowler, All Pro, Anthony Walker, who's a very underrated player, a very good player. It's crazy to believe he was a 5th round pick. He's been very, very good for the Colts. And also now you throw in Okereke. So the Colts have these type of players now that they can build with. And you even saw a little bit out of VJ Speed in the preseason. You never know what's going to happen with that guy. I mean, he played really, really well in the preseason. He just didn't really get any run in the regular season. I mean, he wasn't supposed to. So the Colts have some guys that they can build with. Okereke is definitely a guy that they can build with. And so I can definitely see where you're coming from, Derek. But the reason why I didn't have Okereke as my team rookie of the year was because I had him as my breakout player.
Gotcha.
He was my breakout player because, all the stuff we just mentioned. I mean, he had a sack, 2 forced fumbles, started 9 games. I mean, he was consistently good for the Colts. And he also had, I believe, that pick 2, I guess, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
On that one play, he had the interception on the 2-point conversion. And he just was making plays as a rookie, and that's what you kind of have to do, especially if you're playing across from an all-pro player, generational type player like Darius Leonard. I mean, Bobby Okereke, I think, played very, very well considering all the circumstances.
Absolutely. For breakout, that was another thing that I could have potentially had Bobby Okereke for. I'm going to go with something I doubt a lot of people have actually said this, but given what Colts media said about him before the season started, and I kind of questioned how much he was going to contribute to this team before this. My breakout player for this year was Justin Houston. And I think that'll surprise a lot of people because they're going to say, oh, well, Justin Houston, he's on the D line. I mean, another defensive player. Yeah, but he had the second most sacks in a season with us this year than he had with his breakout year when he had 20 sacks that year, really way back. I don't even remember how many years it was, but
I believe it was 2014.
Yeah, it was 2014. That's right. But how much of Colts media actually thought he was going to reach over 10 sacks? I certainly didn't. I didn't think he would do that. I thought, he's going to be that 7.5 to 8 sacks. He's not going to get to play a lot. They're going to want to save him. I think they would have done that a lot more had, obviously the injuries to our defensive line early in the season, especially to our young guys. Obviously, those injuries forced Justin Houston to play a lot more. And given the circumstance of Andrew Luck not playing, the defense was on the field a lot more than what we needed him to be. So he had to play a lot more. But with the way that he just carried himself, he provided some big play material in games that we needed him, especially against his former team when he had that sack and he had that big fourth down stop against the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. That let everybody in the NFL know, hey, I'm still here. I'm still good. Bring me in here. And I loved it. I loved seeing Justin Houston have one of his best seasons of his career when you look at it from a sack standpoint and an impact standpoint. I think he's happy to be in a 4-3 system. He says that he kind of likes that a little more, so he doesn't have to play in coverage. He can just do what he likes to do, which is go after the quarterback. And he certainly did that this year. He provided something that we were missing from most other players on the D line this year, which was getting pressure on the quarterback, and that's what he provided. So that's why he was my breakout this year.
Yeah, that's a good player for a breakout. And I think when people think of breakout player, I think you typically think of young guys, guys that have got drafted and haven't really done anything, and then they have a season where they really, really play well and they kind of establish themselves as one of the top players in the league. That's what I always think of, at least when I think of breakout players. But I think that's fair. Justin Houston came in and nobody really knew what he was going to provide. I think some fans kind of looked at it and thought, aging pass rusher, we've seen this before. Think back to when the Colts were, projected to go to the Super Bowl years ago, when they had that, they brought in Andre Johnson, they brought in Todd Hermans, they brought in some of these guys, and they also brought in Trent Cole. I think you can get some PTSD of that, like, right? Justin Houston is going to be that type of player again, where Trent Cole had like 2 sacks the entire season.
Right.
And I think that's fair. But, he ended the season with 11 sacks and the first Colt to post double-digit sacks since Eric Walden. And so it's been a couple of years since the Colts have missed that. And really, you think besides Eric Walden, like they haven't really had a guy like Justin Houston since Robert Mathis retired. And it's been a while. And so, I think Justin Houston was definitely probably Chris Ballard's best free agent signing this last year. And I think he definitely deserves to be on that list for breakout player. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, so Zach kind of had it listed as biggest disappointment and most underrated player.
Yeah.
And I think I'll probably do the biggest disappointment last. So we'll move to the most underrated player. And for me, that's Anthony Costanzo. And I don't know if you guys heard if you've been on Twitter today or social media today, you probably heard the rumors about Anthony Costanzo. Not quite sure what's next for him. I mean, this is a contract year. His contract expires this year. He's going to be 32 years old and, all these things. And he's just kind of weighing right now, what's my future? Is it, Chris Ballard and Frank Reich have made it pretty clear, like we want you to be our left tackle, but ultimately, man, it's up to Anthony Costanzo. And he's the kind of player, I think he's kind of cut from the same cloth as Andrew Luck. Like he's a guy that, he loves football, but like he also has other interests outside of football. And so Anthony Costanzo, he's so important to this Colts offensive line. And I think he's the most unappreciated guy, probably most unappreciated left tackle in the league. I mean, when you think of the elite of left tackles are really good left tackles, I don't really think a lot of people typically think Anthony Costanzo. But, I think he had probably one of his best seasons. He's had the past couple of years some of his best seasons as a Colt. And I think he's just so important to what the Colts do offensively. And we've talked about Anthony Costanzo before on this podcast. Like you made the statement, Derek, like, I don't think if you went out and tried to replace Costanzo, you could do it really. Like he is just one of those players, unless you get an elite player, like I don't think you can replace Costanzo that easily. So, he for me is the most underrated player because he just does so much. He allows you to do so much. And, Andrew Luck didn't have to worry about his blind side, even though he had to worry about every other position on the offensive line. He didn't have to worry about his blind side because Anthony Costanzo has been there for years now. I mean, he was drafted in 2011 to protect Peyton Manning. And then he actually protected Andrew Luck for all those years. And he was the only player that actually tried and actually did that. So Costanzo makes it for me. Do you have somebody who you think's the most underrated player for the Colts?
I was honestly about to go with Anthony Costanzo, but you kind of took the words out of my mouth there. I'm probably going to go with somebody else. But yeah, going off of what you stated with the Costanzo rumors, yeah, he stated, I have some thinking to do. They pretty much have stated that he wasn't really saying like, oh, I'm not considering coming back. Of course, that's not true. I'm just saying, there's some things in motion. I am getting up there in age. I'm just trying to weigh my options here. But I will say this with Costanzo's not had the injury history, right, that we've seen of Andrew Luck. So that's not the issue I'm worried about. Costanzo was healthy all year long. He said this is the healthiest he's felt since being drafted pretty much. So I'm not worried about his health. That's not what I'm worried about. I don't think his age is what's making him wonder. What I think is bringing this about is whether or not he believes he's going to get paid the money that he feels he is required. Because like I said, and I'm going to continue to say this, Anthony Costanzo is easily a top 5 left tackle in the NFL right now. And statistics back that up easily. So you have to pay a guy that's that good. So, I mean, we already know that Chris Ballard's going to have to pay Darius Leonard next year. He's going to have to pay Quentin Nelson next year. We already know that, Costanzo, we're not going to give him a long-term deal because he's getting up there in age. And even though he feels healthy, you don't give a guy that's going to be 32 a contract that big, even at offensive line. And I was one of those people that, I've been talking with people on Twitter all the time about these offensive linemen that we have as free agents, that we need to continue to bring Haig back and we need to bring Costanzo back because these are pivotal points in our offense that need to be addressed and they need to stay as long as possible. And of course, I'm sure Ballard and Reich have talked to him numerous times and said, of course we want you back because you've been productive. You have done nothing but be great for us. And of course we want to bring you back. I think Costanzo's just wondering, okay, you say that now, where's my money? Where's my money to prove to me that you're willing to keep me around? How much is Chris Ballard going to give him? I don't know. If it were me, dude, I'm bringing in the 2 to 3 year deal and I'm paying him a really pretty penny because did he even miss a snap all season? I don't think he did. Probably I don't ever remember him going down. I know Quentin Nelson went down for a few times and Ryan Kelly did and Braden Smith did, but I never saw Costanzo really get hurt at all.
Mm-mm.
I mean,
he's been like that like his whole career, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he's been really good. That's what I'm saying. I don't think the health is the issue, whether or not it's going to be that. I hope the Colts do bring him back. But anyway, to my to my underrated player, I'm going to go with Kenny Moore. Now, I'm going with him for not the sake of Indianapolis media, but the sake of the national media. The statistics back this up that Kenny Moore is the best slot corner in all of football, right? It's stats. And then every single time he misses a game, the Colts secondary struggles tremendously when he's not on the field. Tremendously. Even more though so when Pierre Desir is off. If Kenny Moore is there, it makes it even better for them still. He is so underrated by the national media that it's laughable sometimes the way they talk about him. So that's why he's my underrated player when you look at just stats, but you never really quite hear his name that often. But when you look at the stats completely back it up that he's out there and he is being productive, even though his numbers aren't quite showing it.
Right. And that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, he is so underrated. And, I just think that, I don't know why, like for whatever reason, like a lot of Colts players are underrated. Like if you don't have a top quarterback in the league, you don't really get talked about. And so that's kind of what the Colts were this year. And that's kind of how it's been. Okay. So moving on now to our biggest disappointments. I actually had 2 guys that I listed, but I'll talk about one of them. My 2 guys.
I think I know who they are.
Mark Glowinski, Danico Autry were my two guys. You could also throw Marcus Hunt in there as well. But I'm going to go with Autry because we have talked up Autry. I specifically have talked up Autry a lot. I mean, he had 9 sacks last year, and he didn't even play all 16 games. I was like, okay, this guy is going to break out this year. He's going to have double-digit sacks. And when he was on the field in 2018, he was so productive, and I flopped, and I failed, and that was, I guess Danico Autry failed, and he did not even come close to expectations. But for my prediction, I will say I am wrong because I will eat my words. He did not do anything. I mean, I think he had 3.5 sacks the whole year. I mean, he just was not a factor at all. And, yeah, it sucks. He played 14 games. I mean, it was just kind of a disaster, honestly. He didn't do anything the whole year. 3.5 sacks the whole year. He had less sacks in more games this year than he did last year, I believe. And so he just was a major disappointment. I was like, man, where was this guy we saw last year who just was unblockable? He just was like nowhere. He didn't do anything. Didn't block field goals, didn't block extra points, didn't do anything this year that he did in 2018. And he's getting up there in age now. So I think that was probably just an outlier season. I don't know what happened that season that he was so productive, but he just completely fell back to earth this year. And so he is definitely my biggest disappointment. Who is yours, Derek?
You took the words out of my mouth right there. I've seen a lot of different answers to this one. I've seen a lot of different answers, honestly. Anyone that I saw a bunch of names on Twitter that people were saying were busts. I mentioned on Twitter again for a bunch of people who people keep saying are busts. Everybody knows my opinion on that. But anyway, yeah, Danico Autry is completely the biggest bust on the team there. I mean, some people have the opinion of Eric Ebron, but I also have the option of saying that Jacoby Brissett was the one throwing him the football and Brian Hoyer for a game or two as well. So I can make that argument. But Danico Autry, there is nothing for you. There's nothing for you. You had 9 sacks last year, bro. You were this close, man, to the double digits. You were there. You were the next big, you were the impressive free agent that nobody talked about at the beginning of the year. But then when you started producing, you were the holy grail of free agents that Chris Ballard brought in. And then this year we're like, oh, well, he can at least replicate that, right? He's going to have other people on the defensive line that they're going to have to contribute to. Obviously, we saw that, Justin Houston being added to the line and some other players, Jabal Sheard still being there. It only made sense that Danico Autry would get some good plays, though, right? Well, in the first 4 games, he had 2 sacks. It was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good. He's getting pressure. We're off to a decent start. And then over the last 12 games, he's been hurt consistently and then continued to just not gain pressure at all on anyone. It's remarkably sad that, we put such high expectations on him, and then that's ultimately what happened. So, yeah, the biggest disappointment for me, like you said, it's going to be Danico Autry for me.
Yeah, and some people were just like, well, I said Marcus Hunt, I said this player, I said that player. For me, it was the expectations that I had put on this player. Like, when you think of like a Marcus Hunt.
I mean, we all put him there. We all put him in that pedestal that, he was going to at least get around the same number of sacks.
Right. And it's just like, maybe he just needed a change of scenery. Well, I guess not. I don't know. Yeah. It's just like, it's like, I don't know. For me, I'm just like putting my hands on my face, just like face palming right now. And that's just kind of the definition of this Colts season. I mean, it's just been like such high expectations. And then it just all comes crashing down and reality hits. And we're like, wow, we weren't as good as we thought we were. And there's a lot of factors into that, injuries, Andrew Luck, all that stuff. But it's just been one of those years. And I think Danico Autry, just being the biggest disappointment, it was just, another kind of kick to the groin a little bit, honestly, for what we thought this season could be. I mean, we were talking Super Bowl. We were talking number 1 seed. We were talking all these things, and 7-9, 13th overall pick is where we ended up. And so Colts have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of things to figure out, including Danico Autry and Marcus Hunt, and they have a lot of work to do this offseason to be considered contenders. And who knows? Maybe we'll get a quarterback this year. Wouldn't put Jacoby Brissett on that list as the biggest disappointment because I think he was kind of what we thought he was. I mean, he was exceeding expectations before at the beginning of the year, and he just kind of fell back to reality. So I wouldn't have him on that list either. But Derek has just been one of those years, man. But it's off-season time. It's free agency draft talk time. So we'll definitely have a lot more podcasts talking about that stuff in the coming weeks. But I think everybody just needs to take a break from this season. It's been a really weird season because you go from beating the Kansas City Chiefs, now the number 2 seed, to getting beat by the Miami Dolphins, getting beat by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, getting beat by the Jaguars without like half their team. It's just come to the point where it's like I'm just not even like shocked. Oh, and you also got beat by Mason Rudolph. I don't want to forget about that.
Right.
So it's just one of those seasons, Derek, where you're just like, what could have been, but can't live in the past. So we got to move forward. But we just wanted to recap kind of this up and down season and kind of look back. And now we're going to move forward and talking about stuff that's to come. And the future is still very bright for the Colts, even though it kind of looks right now like, well, this was not what we thought it would be. And so, but I think I can speak for most Colts fans. And, for me, it's just like ever since Chris Ballard has come in, I mean, I felt like I could trust the guy. And he's proven time and time again, yes, he's a human. Yes, he's allowed to make mistakes, believe it or not.
Yeah, I know, right? That's inexcusable for some people, right?
Can you believe he drafted a guy that didn't pan out? I mean, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it almost reminds you of another guy we had before.
Okay, whenever people say that, I'm like, okay, just go back and look at Ryan Grigson's 2013 draft. I dare you. Go back and look at that draft. Please.
Yeah, please.
It's just kind of like, guys, like that was like a historically awful draft. And now if the Colts don't have everybody, if they have a player that ends up being a bust, it's like, oh, is Chris Ballard really that good?
Bad enough. Like, Eric was doing a poll to be like, which draft was the worst of Ryan Grigson's short term with the Colts? Like the sad fact that you had to actually print them out and actually say, oh, he had multiple ones. Can't relate with Chris Ballard. I can't relate.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, like Chris Ballard literally drafted 2 All-Pros in the same draft, and Ryan Grigson didn't even draft an All-Pro ever. I mean, you could maybe put Andrew Luck was close, but I mean, my grandma could have drafted Andrew Luck.
He drafted few. He drafted few people who are still in the league.
It was wild.
Yeah, let's contribute that one.
It's wild. I was like looking a couple years ago, like I think it was like 2016, 2017. I was like, oh my gosh, like the 2013 draft was like only a few years ago. And literally like none of these players are still on the team. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. That draft was historically awful. And I don't even know how you can like whiff on every single player. You're bound to hit one guy. One guy, solid player.
But hey, you know what? We're on to better things now. The season's over. I know it wasn't what we wanted. I know, but you can spot some good in here. We're going to have to just get back to the drawing board, get what we need to get done. And I can't wait for this offseason because I'm going to be more into this one than I ever have been.
It's going to be fun, man. I'm really excited for this offseason. I think Chris Ballard and Frank Reich, they know what they need to improve on. And in Frank Reich's press conference, he even talked about specifically pointed out the passing offense. So you got to think the Colts are going to take a quarterback and get some offensive help. They still have a lot of work ahead of them, but I think the future's in good hands. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening. We really appreciate it as always. And go Colts.